In 1990, when I was in Year 9, the local football club won the Allenbank and District Football League Grand Final. The team was made up of mostly local farmers from the community. On the Monday after the weekend, the winning team borrowed an old flatbed truck, normally used for hay carting, but in this case it was loaded up with hay bales for seats and kegs of beer. That Monday, the winning team proceeded to drive around the district with music blaring and handing out beers to all the locals in each town. They came to our school and we all ran out of the classroom to greet them. It was a country way of doing a victory lap because you need to celebrate your wins. So today, after a great historic weekend for our party, we ask you to jump up on our flatbed truck, put on some chisel, pour yourself a drink, and let's go for a drive around Australia and celebrate this landslide victory for the Red Team. But first, a message from our sponsors. The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn. Dunn is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address, because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn has been fighting for workers' rights in Australia for more than 100 years. They believe the law should serve everyone and not just those that can afford it. So for empathetic and expert legal support, call Maurice Blackburn Lawyers today. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We are taping this one on a Wednesday lunchtime, a couple of days after the election, on the lands of the Wurundjeri people and potentially soon to be declared the federal Labor electorate of Melbourne, because on the weekend, the Labor Party, led by Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, had a pretty good weekend. History was made. Leaders were dumped. Seats that we didn't even know existed were won. And we are going to revel in it for the next 7 hours, because this is the fun part of having this podcast. And to help me steer this podcast, I'm once again joined. I'm so excited I can't even get to the start. I'm once again joined by my two regular guests from over the past 6 weeks, starting with the former Deputy Chief of Staff to three-peat election-winning machine Premier Daniel Andrews, and now partner at FMRS Advisory, Jessie McCrone. Welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Particularly happy to be here today, Stephen.
And he was the former campaign director, senator and member for Batman, and a humble scrutineer at the West Garth Primary. And I bet you he had a lot of fun on Saturday night as well. David Feeney, welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Thank you very much. And I might say booth captain at West Garth Primary.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I want all my titles.
We have so much to cover. But let's start with the overall results. Now, remember, this is, as I said, it's Wednesday, so you're hearing this on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Obviously, this will change a little bit. But as it stands right now, Labor's primary had a 2.2% swing nationally to it, so we're currently sitting on 34.8%. The Liberals had a swing against them of 3.5% on primary. That puts them down to 32.2%. And at a national two-party preferred estimate, right now, Labor is on 54.9% two-party preferred. The Liberals are on 45.1%. Over the weekend, Labor gained in Queensland, Bonner, Dixon, Ford, Brisbane, Griffith, Petrie, Leichhardt. In New South Wales, Hughes, Banks. Feel free to cheer along at home while you're listening to this. In Tasmania, Braddon, Bass. In South Australia, Sturt. In WA, Moore. No one even knew that seat existed. In Victoria, Deakin. And there are 13 seats still in doubt, of which Labor is leading in all of those seats that we are in a contest with. Labor could get to 94 seats in the House of Representatives, and a historic result for a party that has been around for a very long time. To you, David Feeney, your initial thoughts, reflections, feelings about the weekend.
Well, utterly remarkable. You'll remember when we last caught up and as we headed into the final weekend, my prediction that I was forced to write down at that stage was 78, and I was very nervous about that number. Our vote was soft. There was so much that could go wrong. And after I had finished my scrutineering duties at Westgarth Primary School, I came home, sat on the couch and watched the best reality TV show I've watched in my whole life, as we found that the Labor Party's advanced squads, as you say, were conquering territory that we had not imagined. It was an absolutely incredible night and really the fruit of an incredible campaign.
Jessie, your reaction to the weekend?
I similarly, Stephen, you and I found ourselves accidentally sort of jammed between a pub and home when the coverage started after finishing on a booth, which was a significant strategic area from us. And I kept thinking, it's fine. These are all just early booths. Like, we don't need to be worried about the fact that we're not in front of a television yet. And it was just at the point where I turned to you and said, Can I now start being happy? Like, are we through the part where we feel like this is just optimistic early booths? And that was excellent. And that's when we start, to David's point, seeing seats fall that we just never could have imagined or predicted. Although I suspect some in the national campaign did predict those and had done a lot of work that, as we talked about in the podcast, some of it we would never have been able to see. And that certainly paid off.
So the way that we're going to run this episode is we're going to sort of have a chat about, I guess, the talking points, the main talking points from the night, and then we're going to just do a bit of a state-by-state breakdown of Labor's success. Then we're going to have a look at the other parties, starting with the Libs, Greens, Nats, whatnot, and then we'll get to the categories. So hopefully between all those things, we're going to cover off everyone's thoughts, feelings, and everything else in between. So one of the first things I want to sort of go to you, David, is from Saturday night. It's one of the highest two-party preferred votes Labor has ever received at a federal election. Certainly it's the highest since the Second World War. It's also one of our lowest primary votes ever. And I'm not saying this is a criticism, but this is the second time we've won government with a historic low primary. And in the old campaign norm, for Labor to be competitive, we'd always say that our primary had to have a 4 in it. And when we say it had to have a 4 in it, we didn't mean 34, we meant 40-something. But maybe this is the norm now. Like the primary totals between the three groups, Labor, Coalition, and Other, was all a third, basically. Is this what we come to expect now?
Well, maybe. Of course, the dynamic at the moment is that it seems when somebody stops voting Liberal and votes for an independent or a minor party, they preference Labor. Labor's preference flows from that other third are incredibly strong. So on the one hand, there's cause for optimism about this future dynamic if we're getting those sorts of preference flows. The Liberal Party, of course, was relying on enormous preference flows from a supercharged One Nation vote, and that never materialised. So one interesting thing to speculate about is why is it that when someone stops voting Liberal and votes for an independent or votes for a minor party, they're not going back to their party of origin, they are gone. But the second thing that we should always be nervous about, if this is the new normal, is just how soft our vote is and how reliant we are on preference flows that we don't control, and how vulnerable that inevitably makes Labor Party members in the lower house.
Jessie?
So, Stephen, you and I have discussed this on election day about, is this just a function of the fact that it's a lot easier to get on the ballot now and there's a lot more people who are prepared to sign up and become a candidate? So I did some work over the last couple of days of just working out how many candidates ran in the last election, this election. So there were 1,200 candidates on the ballot this campaign, and I thought, 2022, there must have been many fewer than that. But it wasn't. It was only sort of 100 less. It was about 1,000 candidates. But when you compare that to 1996, where there were only 800 candidates on ballots, you start seeing how this move to many people, and sort of realise this when putting together the form guide, where you realise how many candidates you have to squeeze into the table. There felt like a lot more people were running. It's not entirely accurate. It doesn't explain all of it. It does explain some of it. I think the interesting thing out of what David has just said as well is how important is the how to vote? Like, in these places where people had decided to vote independent, were they following the independents' how to vote card and coming to Labor? And is that a massive challenge for us? I haven't had a look at that closely. And the other thing I would say is it turned out One Nation had just stolen the primary from the Liberals. They weren't augmenting the general right vote.
One interesting anecdote to come out of West Garth Primary School was I handed out there all day. There was never a Liberal on the booth at any point during the day handing out. About 15% of the community voted Liberal, but they all did it without a how to vote card. Mm. Now, in the olden days, the Greens would get a very reasonable shake of that vote. And I always used to think, well, it's because if someone's voting Liberal, they've always comprehended that Labor is the adversary. And they'll go through the ballot paper, and a lot of them would put Labor last because they were in a Liberal-Labor universe. Well, we got 80% of those preferences vis-a-vis the Greens on Saturday night. And I was thinking, well, isn't that interesting? Liberals have, all these people who voted without a how to vote card have reconfigured their ideological universe. And they now see the Greens as being less desirable than Labor, or at least 80% of them do. So even over the 10 years that I've been scrutineering this booth, we've seen that shift.
Change behaviour.
I also, to your original point, David, as well, I also think that those folks that had probably voted for the coalition at previous elections, and in this case voted for an independent and then preferenced Labor, I think in earlier iterations of elections, I'm talking like the 90s and maybe early 2000s, those folks probably would have went straight to Labor. And I just don't think that this time around they were overly convinced by both leaders. But in the end, in making a decision between Dutton and Albanese, preferenced us higher. And I think that it's on us to actually win those voters. They are the soft voters that can be won and can become a Labor primary, which would then see our primary lift back up into certainly high 30s, maybe not 40s, but certainly high 30s.
I agree. And I think one of the ingredients for making that happen is if the government can really build a sense of momentum over the term around a positive agenda and a real feeling of reform and momentum. Because let's remember, we won this election after entering the race with a government that really had no momentum at all, and built that momentum over the course of 90 days, really. So I think one of the preconditions for what you're describing, Stephen, will be a much stronger 3 years in government.
So I put this question to a few people who are happily heading back into government after the election about, do people sort of realise or understand or credit the campaign with this win? One of them said to me, well, Jim said it on television on the night. Like there is no delusion at the top about how important this campaign was to their victory. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there are a bunch of people walking into cabinet thinking, I'm going to have to do a lot better this term than I did last term. But certainly the view about the victory does seem to be well solidified. How much they were a drag or how much work they have to do to be different, I'm not convinced that there is a clear view coming out of the government yet, because, they're all talking about who's going to be in the cabinet anyway.
Well, I think the critical thing there will be the Prime Minister's office, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't feel like cabinet ministers let us down over the last 3 years. I've said again and again how impressed I've been by how the cabinet has worked and how that talent has been allowed to soar in cabinet. My complaint's been about running a story and running a narrative centrally. Letting talented people run free is one thing, but it's still the Prime Minister and the key spokespeople who have got to tell the story of the government. That's the bit that was missing.
Yeah, because I would say that Labor came to this election with a very strong policy offering that will have come out of the Prime Minister's office. So in terms of that element of the campaign, the Prime Minister's office did their job.
As did the ministers.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, Jessie, a question about why didn't we see this landslide coming? I went back and looked at the polling numbers of all the major pollsters, their very last poll before Saturday. Ipsos had Labor's, this is Labor's two-party preferred I'm giving here. Ipsos had Labor at 51, Freshwater 51.5, Newspoll 52.5, YouGov 52.5, Essential, Redbridge 53, and Morgan, a broken clock is always right twice a day, 53. So, Essential, Redbridge and Morgan were kind of the closest to the pin, but even, Ipsos and Freshwater were way off. And this isn't no kind of a criticism of polling, but, none of us really saw this landslide coming, and I want to get your thoughts on why that might have been the case.
There's a couple of reasons for that. One is trauma in terms of the Labor Party. 2019 is six in our head. It's stuck in the Prime Minister's head. He mentioned it, and it seemed to be some sort of chant that was coming out of the Labor campaign in a positive way throughout the 5 weeks.
It's good for discipline.
No, it is. And I think that it's an important thing for campaigns to build urgency around these things as well. So trauma is part of it. It's part of the reason, in discussion with some of the people who were involved in your 4-hour podcast, Stephen, as to why they weren't prepared to be a little bit more forward-leaning. It's certainly why I was not a little bit more forward-leaning on a few seats. So trauma is one of those things. The second thing is, like Freshwater have admitted the way that they, for those of you who aren't particularly au fait with how polling works, there's a weighting system. They give different elements or different elements of the votes a weight as to how much that impacts the end mathematical result of whether it's 51, 52, 53 in a 2PP. Freshwater admits that they over-relied on the voice referendum results as part of their methodology. I find it astounding that they used that as a key demographic sort of indicator of vote. I think we all know Labor people. Well, the results show there were a bunch of Labor people who voted no in the referendum.
Apparently,
that
Jessie,
was clear.
The Liberal Party did that in its own polling as well.
It did, yeah. So, like, it's a key problem that some of the polling companies have had. We haven't had a full look at the methodology of all of the different polling companies that will come. There's been a real push across the polling landscape to sort of share lessons and have a look at methodology, and I think that's a really good thing for Australian politics, that pollsters are being honest and open about those things. I'd say Morgan keeps predicting the Victorian result, and every time it comes out we go, yeah, sure, Morgan's going to say we're going to win in this landslide, but I will say they have been right about the last 2 Victorian elections and pretty close on this one, so I'm perhaps going to stop mocking Morgan's results. The other thing is just things like the Chinese vote was so important in this campaign, and I think it's been said by commentators, it was said before the election result by us and others. ESL voters are hard to poll. That there is language barriers sometimes. Hiring companies that do this specifically is not easy. It is not cheap. Parties do it. The published polls don't account for those kind of groups. So there are a bunch of things here. I wouldn't say polling is worthless. I think some people have predicted the end of polling way too early. But there are a lot of lessons for the pollsters out of this campaign, and a lot of lessons for the Labor Party about emotional scarring.
David, I found interested to get your thoughts on the reaction on election night by the Liberal Party senators and MPs, the talking heads, as they watched their hopes of winning government disappear by 9 o'clock, really blaming it on the dissemination of lies by the Labor Party against the coalition. And I just thought that was a bit rich coming from the Conservatives that essentially won a referendum on dis and misinformation only a year ago. What did you make of that from the Tories?
Well, we managed to lose that referendum because it was misinformation versus no information. I always feel for the people who are sent into those assignments and find themselves sitting directly on top of a volcano as it goes off live on television. Presumably they were briefed by the Liberal Party before they went on that the Liberal Party was going to win a swag of seats and fall short. Clearly, the Liberal Party's internal polling had a much more optimistic picture about what was happening to them. And so I don't think they went on thinking they were going to win, but I think they went on thinking Dutton was going to win something in the order of 10 seats and continue to lead them into a two-term strategy. And, of course, as we know, they sat there and watched the carnage. So then their key lines, as you say, Labor lies. Well, that's kind of predictable, Medi-scare. It's all very unfair. But as the night went on and the results just went deeper and deeper, and they realised that their party was facing an existential moment and a future where its very existence was up for grabs, they all started to look deeper, didn't they? And they started to really understand that, whether one looked at the policy offering or the demographic support, they were an absolute mess and that they needed to go back to first principles. So by the time the coverage, the election was essentially declared at 8:30, and for the next 2 hours while we waited for the leaders to get up and get out, we watched the commentators wrestling with this question about how could it be so. And on the ABC coverage, Jim Chalmers really just almost turned around and said, listen, mate, I've been there. I'm not going to kick you to death. But all of the ABC journalists who were there said, well, we're not so kind because we're far more...
It was Annabelle's funniest line of the night, Comical Ali. That was very good.
Yes, Chemical Ali, poor old Chemical Ali. But the ABC journalists demonstrated that they were more enthusiastic to kick the Liberal Party than anybody. And so I think we ended up seeing moments of honesty from the Liberals.
I think just to add to that, I think the other thing to just contemplate is how these spokespeople are selected to go on these shows. There's always this rush where the centre is trying to make sure that the people that back the leader are the ones on the panels, so that if things go bad, that the messaging can be done in a certain way. It's always hard, obviously, when the deputy leader or something is your biggest detractor, because it's hard to argue they shouldn't be on the panel. But there is a lot of positioning here to try and make sure your guys are the ones on the panel giving the spin on the message as per the leader's wishes on the night.
But the coverage really has changed. I was reflecting on this with some of my friends, wounded friends.
Tony Barry had some reflections on this as well.
I thought he did. And that is that, in the olden days, the parties would send their sort of lead apparatchik figures onto the show. And so you'd see the Graham Richardsons or the Robert Rays, and each of them would have a coterie of apparatchiks around them feeding them information. I used to be one of them. And the Liberal Party did the same. You'd have a Nick Minchin, or so they weren't politicians preening themselves for their next promotion or their next outing. It was really machine operators from both parties. And
who understood the numbers.
And were having real analytical conversations with each other and with the journalists. And that's kind of been pushed aside now. And increasingly you do have aspirants rather than operators from the Liberal Party and the Labor Party. But more important than that is the fact that it's now journalist on journalist conversation. Yeah. And the journalists have become the stars of the show. And there are now so many journalists sitting in the studio up the front. There's hardly room for a politician or a pollster, is there?
I don't think Tingle actually was on shot on the ABC.
Sorry?
I thought the panel was so big on the ABC, Tingle wasn't even in shot.
No, I wondered if they were going to drop her down from the ceiling on a bungee. So it's just become a farce. And let me get this off my chest. The commercial station that does that whole dropping the politician into the pit of water thing should be excoriated. I'm a Labor stalwart. I have been since I was a teenager, and I derive no joy from watching Peter Dutton get dropped into and let alone the rest. It's just appalling. And so here are all these people in public life who've done their best to serve their country, and on their night of defeat, they've served 99.9% of the time they've served to the best of their efforts and consistent with their conscience. And then we've got these noodles dropping their image into it's pitiful.
And the same people who...
It's cruel. And
it's just,
it annoys me.
The same people who argue, why don't we have a nicer polity? Why is there all this sort of these attacks, these puerile attacks that go across?
Why are they so negative?
And Latika Burke, when the Prime Minister goes up to give a victory speech and what is one of the biggest victories in Australian modern political history, tweets, I hope he doesn't fall off the stage. Like,
boom, boom.
Albo gave a very conscientious speech about his opposition candidate, and he did better than the journalists on that front.
It's interesting you brought that up, David. It was one of my things I was going to talk about later on in the show when we get to categories. But no, let's do it now. Like the ABC, like I sort of, good night, bad night. I have the ABC coverage and broadly all of the networks coverage bad night. The ratio between analysis and seat by seat data updates it's out of whack. Like if you look at say MSNBC's or CNN's election coverage in the United States, the presidential election, 75% of the time it's someone like John King or Steve Kornacki that's at the board giving you updates of, state by state, district by district, county by county. And it's only when he needs to go take a toilet break do they throw to the main host so they can do a bit of filling and then they go back again, right? The golden hour in an Australian election night is that sort of 7:30 till 9 p.m. when primary results in the booths are starting to come through to the tally room and then two-party preferred. Just stick with Anthony Green or whoever it's going to be for that period. I don't want to your point, I don't want to hear from David Spears or whoever else it might be. If there was ever a night where you hand political coverage over to the data nerds and the people that campaign to win those votes, it's this night. I don't want shit analysis from a bunch of journalists.
And that's how it was in the olden days.
Making it about themselves. Like it's just the egos that need to be massaged and the 50 people on the desk. And there's a couple of gags coming in later on from some of our listeners about it. Like it's true. Everyone agreed. It's crap.
Can I offer a counterpoint? You and I both know that we have friends overseas who are political junkies who did write, you don't know how good you have it with this kind of analysis. I watch it and compare it to American political pundits, and the analysis you get out of Australian political coverage is a lot better.
They've been away too long. We've been away too long. It's not analysis. It's gotcha questions by David Spears about are you going to challenge the leadership? I don't care about that right now. I don't care about that right now. What is going on in the Melbourne Faulkner booth right now? Like, tell me. That's what I want to know.
Next news story.
That's right. Are you going to run for leader? Checks notes from head office.
Yeah.
No.
God almighty. Piss off. Anyway, one more question about the night to you, Jessie. Then we'll go to then we'll go to leader speeches. Tony Barry on the ABC tried to pin the loss initially on Donald Trump and then kind of moved to attacking the Victorian division of the Liberal Party. And Jessie, obviously you do morning radio with Raf, with him from time to time. Tony Barry is a former Liberal pollster, and you wrote a column, and a chance for you to plug your article in the Fin Review, about this and pushing back on this idea that Donald Trump was the reason why the Libs lost on Saturday night.
Yeah, I think that the overlap of our audience here of people that listen to this podcast and read the AFR is basically a flat circle. So I'm not sure how much of the article I need to repeat. But yeah, Tony Barry sort of started this. Well, we talked about this on the podcast 2 weeks out, I think, that we were saying that this campaign's been so bad, the Liberal Party will start saying this was Donald Trump's fault. That work started at least on the Friday before the election. And I think that it's just, look, Trump had an impact in this campaign. He did not organise for the Prime Minister, the alternative Prime Minister, to have 5 triple backflips over 5 weeks. He did not organise for them to completely fuck up their polling. Like, this was a disaster campaign. Trump was a factor. He is not the reason in a structural and campaign sense why the Liberal Party ran a fucking woeful campaign.
Yeah, I think... just to be a contrarian, on balance, Jessie's wrong here. I think Trump was a big factor. Now, I understand why we want to dismiss that. We want to dismiss that so that we can maximise the credit that goes to the parliamentary and organisational wings of the Labor Party, and that's a noble idea. But I think we've got to be clear-eyed about it. Trump did turn from being a lead star to a disastrous prophet for the global right. And when he moved on tariffs and discombobulated everybody's superannuation and plunged the global economy into a crisis of his own making, he did switch up the narrative in a way that worked well for Labor. And it did mean that when people like Jacinta Bryce said, "Make Australia great again," she was jumped on by the media and looked like a goose. Voters did respond to it. It was a factor.
I am not saying Trump was not a factor. I think the idea that it changed the structural construction of their campaign is an absolute cop-out. They had not done the policy work. They did not have a plan.
That's true, but the Trumpy aversion to being Trumpy may have put them wildly off course in terms of what they were planning to do on something like immigration.
But I would call that a strategic error by the campaign early. Like, Trump has never been popular in this country.
Trump presented them with new factors that they could not grapple with.
Yeah, well, I would say the same people we're talking about did point out that the polling suggests ahead of the campaign that people considered the Liberal Party a better party to handle Donald Trump. Like, again, it is a chance of the coalition actually capitalising on what I would see as the context. Trump is not to blame. He's the context behind which this campaign was run. The Liberal Party did a terrible job of managing that context. They also just broadly did a terrible job of preparing and executing a campaign.
I did enjoy watching Donald Trump yesterday say, "Oh, that Albanese guy, very nice, always been very good to me, very respectful, very respectful. Close. The other guy, never heard of him, don't know his name." I thought, gee, if the Liberals could have got that 3 days earlier, it might have been something. I mean, it's a shame when the Liberals weren't playing golf with Trump. One of them couldn't have extracted that as a quote.
The two speeches from the night, starting with the Prime Minister's, Jessie, what do you make of Albanese's speech to the faithful? A lot better than compared to 3 years ago?
Like, it is always hard because you are so excited on the night you don't entirely remember the speech. It's really a vibe sort of activity. I think that the feedback from Labor people that I've spoken to afterwards is they felt an immense sense of hope about what this means for clarity of message and mission going into the next government. He was very magnanimous about the Liberal Party. He talked about unity. I thought his line around the Medicare card is not red, it is not blue, it is green and gold was really, really nice. It was a good speech. I think that I actually also think that Dunn had a reasonable speech as well. So it was no Malcolm Turnbull claiming the election was stolen 2016, but I thought it was really nice. I thought it was a good speech.
David, both speeches going to get your reflections, but in particular Dutton's concession speech, everyone coming out of it was going, why couldn't he have been like that during the campaign? It's sort of that classic concession speech. Do we add it to the pantheon of great speeches by losing leaders up there with Kim Beazley in 1998?
It was a very generous speech, wasn't it? His remarks about Albo and his mum, and then his remarks about how the new member for Dixon, Ellie France, will be a good local member and her son would be very proud of her. They were very generous remarks. I was very moved by them. The other thing that struck me about it, and we must always remember this, is it was a concession speech where he admitted defeat and he congratulated the winner. Never thought much about it before, but these are actually precious rituals in our democracy, because if he'd stood up and said, "We were winning, we're always winning, we had won this and it was stolen," it's ludicrous as that sounds. We do know someone who behaved like that. So, he made a concession speech, a very generous concession speech, and full marks to him. I think Albo's speech was terrific. It was probably too long, which I think goes to Jessie's point about excitement. And he didn't announce a referendum. So win-win. Yay!
I thought his welcome to country was really nice too. I thought that was I thought that was very well
Welcome
done.
to country has got a whole new meaning after this election.
It really does. Which is not a good thing. It is not good that it has been politicised to this point, but I thought the Prime Minister did it well.
No, but I mean, our instinct to do them all the time, everywhere, isn't going to be mitigated by the events of the last weekend, is it?
Okay, let's turn to a bit of a state-by-state breakdown of Labor's success, and we'll start in the People's Republic of Victoria, which continues to remain the People's Republic of Victoria. Labor had a 1.2% swing to us on our primary, taking our primary to 34, and the Libs had a 0.4% swing against them. And the Greens had a 0.6% swing against their primary. Labor's two-party preferred estimate at this stage, in which it had a 1.5% swing to it, is 56.3%. Labor held on to the seats of Aston, Dunkley, Chisholm, McEwen, Bruce, Corangamite, Gorton, and Hawke against the Tories, and hung on to Wills and McNamara against the Greens. And we also picked up Deakin and are ahead in Menzies and in Melbourne.
What was that last one we're heading? Sorry?
Melbourne.
Oh, Melbourne.
I'm getting texts from someone who's at the counter right now. Things weren't looking good in Bendigo or Cornwall, but we'll have to keep an eye on that. I guess the main talking point coming out of the result here in Victoria was this notion of it being a referendum on Jacinta Allen, the Labor Premier of Victoria. And, you know, a while ago, people suggested she was a drag on the ticket, and her leadership wouldn't be safe after the election. Jessie, does that put this to bed?
If this was a referendum on Jacinta Allen, she certainly passed it by flying colours. But I think you and I and David know the Labor Party well enough to know that, unfortunately, evidence doesn't ever stop political arguments. I unfortunately don't think that it will put it to bed in the way it should. We had massive swings to us in the southeast. There has been this ongoing argument about the west versus the southeast. I think I said on the first day of this podcast, until we start treating this as not one side of the state against the other, the Labor Party is really going to have challenges when talking about these things. I am hoping that this election result can demonstrate we've got swings on both sides. There is a way forward about talking about both sides of the state that is not a deficit framing for the other side of the state. So, like, the result in Aston and Deakin is phenomenal and very exciting, and credit to those local campaigns. I know that there were people, we talked about Chisholm as a bit of a smoky, and that if it had been resourced from the start that would possibly win it. They won it.
Menzies.
Yeah, sorry, Menzies. They won it anyway. And Deakin, I know that there had been some work from a couple of unions to go in and back that seat very hard, very early, which is a frustrating thing for a campaign director to hear, but certainly has paid off in spades. Look, the result in Victoria is great. I think that the biggest challenge for Victoria is that we keep getting redder, and as soon as we go back to anything which would be considered some sort of normal two-party state, everyone's going to start screaming about how it's the end of the world. These are phenomenal results. We had a phenomenal result in 22. We've had an even better result in 25. Unfortunately, I don't think that's how it's going to be discussed in the Labor Party.
David, one thing that we talked about was a bit of a fault line between the three of us in our earlier episodes, and I'd sort of said, even in the final episode, I said I don't think we should never have had Hawke and Gorton on our target seat list, and I also said that we were going to get swings to us in Melbourne's east, and that's where we should be making hay whilst the sun is shining. What are your reflections now seeing the result?
Well, I just think it's important for everybody to understand this is a humongous result for Labor in Victoria. I mean, for 10 years now, national campaigns have turned to Victoria and said, you've got to get another one. We can win another one in Victoria. And we're like, no, we can't. We've got every seat we can get, but we'd win another one. And then they'd say the next campaign, we've got to get another one out of Victoria. We can't. There's nothing here. And we'd get another one. Now, this time, they said, this Victorian House of Cards is going to collapse. The Liberal Party said, we are going to get big gains in this state. Victoria is going to be the foundation stone of a Dutton victory. They all said that unpopular state government meant this was going to be like 1990, where we lost 9 federal seats and almost killed the Hawke government. So here we we're all set for, Black Saturday for Labor in Victoria. And what do we get? Oh, my God, more juice out of the lemon. Like, it's amazing. I mean, holding Aston is incredible. We've all given that up for dead. Everybody in the world had given that up for dead, and there it is.
Mary Doyle hadn't, I will say.
No, let's find out what she's on and bottle it, because fabulous. Menzies is an amazing win and kills off, at least at this moment in time, the career of an outstanding Liberal, part of their future. These are amazing results. The result in Wills is a triumph of the will.
Oh.
Watching that campaign gave me PTSD because it was much like the campaign I went through in Batman in 2016. Crowds of flinty-eyed zealots surrounding Peter Khalil at pre-poll, screaming genocide at him every day, and he just stared them down and battled on and has come home with a win. Absolutely outstanding. And then in Melbourne, the centre of this wicked cancer, but we might actually find ourselves with a win. This is totally incredible. We might end up with 24 out of 38 seats. We might actually end up with Victorians in Canberra having a claim for more ministries instead of being on the edge of extinction like the panda, which is what everybody said was going to happen. So this is incredible. And if it's meant to be a reflection on Jacinta Allen, she should take it and march up and down the street. I mean, her adversaries, they ran a billboard campaign saying double trouble. Well, it turns out to be double delight, doesn't it? So they're fucked in a tunnel. And for all of those ghouls who are waiting in the corner to descend on a weakened Jacinta Allen, how disappointed they must be. They must be feeling like they were delusional. Because as it turns out, her position has been strengthened and she's looking great. Now, this doesn't mean the state government doesn't face diabolical challenges. It does. And it doesn't mean Labor's got the next state election campaign in the bag. It doesn't.
No.
But what it does tell us is that Labor is strong and that Jacinta Allen has every reason to believe that hard work and good policy and a good campaign can see us home. And as it turns out, we can all rely on our Liberal Party adversaries to stuff it up. So this is maybe the best Victorian result I've seen in my life because instead of going down the toilet, we just lifted it up a notch and even one more. I mean, next for national campaign, presumably the National Campaign Director will turn to Victoria and ask us why we're not winning, some Gippsland. I mean, because there's not much left.
Well, there we go. That's up there with the rant on Syria, I reckon. I don't think I want to add anything else to that. That's just a work of art.
That was brilliant. Can I just add though, Stephen, it is good that you are doing your live show a little bit later after the election. No, only because there are changes happening in Victoria here. I think my bet is by the live show, Adam Bent will no longer have a career in the federal parliament, but also will have a good sense of what's going on in Cornwall, a better sense of what's going on in Bendigo. But the other thing I would say is this is interestingly the only state where it looks like Dutton's picked up a seat. So the age of trying to run two narratives of no Metro Liberal as far as the eye can see, not to take away from anything David just said because I agree with all of it, but two, we've had a Teal lose their spot. Now, I personally think it's because she did a terrible job engaging with the Jewish community and I think that she's been shown that when that community needed her, she was nowhere to be found and they've repaid her for that. But I think that is an interesting result that it will be good to talk about in a little bit more depth when we have a lot more sort of data coming out of this.
Quite right.
Indeed. Let's go to New South Wales. The overview there is on our primary, we got a 1.9, as it stands right now, got a 1.9% swing to us, so taking our primary to 35.2, 4.6% swing against the coalition, taking their primary down to 32. Two-party preferred, 3.3% swing to Labor, taking our primary in New South Wales up to 54.7. We gained the seats of Banks and Hughes and held on to all of the seats that Todd Pinkerton in our Path to 76 episode examined, but quite easily in the end because there were seats like Gilmore that were a little bit sort of squeaky bum. So we got there in the end, no worries. And the other things we didn't talk about in that show, but we were wondering about was sort of the Muslim Voice campaign. Would it have an impact on these Western Sydney seats? And it didn't even. We're not even talking about it. Like it's completely irrelevant. David, your reflections on the result in New South Wales?
A great result for Labor. A great result for the Teals too. Whereas Melbourne's Teals are fighting for their life at the moment. I think have lost Goldstein. May lose Kooyong. The Teals had a great result. I think they'll fall short in Bradfield, but we'll see. great result. Interesting about the Muslim Voice campaign, it was the fizzer that I think we always predicted it was going to be. Ironically enough, the only corner of Australia where Muslim Voice might have had any impact at all was in Cornwall, where it might have successfully taken out a Labor candidate of Palestinian heritage who's a Muslim. So well done, guys. And in Western Australia, where Muslim Voice has its spiritual leader, Ayatollah Payman, she got 1% of the vote across the state. And so that must cripple her ambitions for re-election. So, yeah, New South Wales, another terrific result for Labor.
Jessie, any thoughts on New South Wales you want to add?
No, but I think I did say one of the best feelings on election night is calling people the head office maybe not spend a lot of time with and didn't necessarily send a lot of resources to. A few of those calls were made in New South Wales to people that they were like, hello, this is how you talk to the media. Don't talk to them again. It's just fantastic. I think no one saw Hughes coming.
Fowler's a disappointment, but not a surprising one. Just to continue.
No, I agree with that. Yeah. She was a good candidate and I think
should have run it last time.
Indeed. Let's go to a state that's certainly close to the hearts of both David and myself, South Australia. The overview there is a 4% swing to Labor on our primary, taking our primary up to 38.5, and a 6.8% swing against the coalition, taking their primary down to 28.7. Labor's two-party preferred, we received a swing of 5%. Our two-party preferred now, as it stands, is 59% in South Australia. We won the seat of Sturt. That's 7 out of 10 seats in South Australia are now in Labor hands. There is no Liberal in metropolitan Adelaide. David?
Yes, I've got to eat some humble pie on this. I thought, and after I finished eating it, I'm going to ring Christopher Pine and remind him that I'm never following his counsel on this subject again.
Sorry, you and Joe Hildebrand had the same view, and it's always good to be in company with Joe.
Oh, well, I've always gone so well. The result in Sturt is outstanding. This is a seat Labor has tilted at in a serious way several times and always fallen short. So I mistakenly thought we were set up for that again. But to storm the barricades there is a triumph. And in Boothby, where I thought the Flint challenge might be a meaningful challenge, turned out it wasn't. And so, as you say, Stephen, best result the Labor Party's had in Adelaide ever. There's not a Liberal in town. Totally incredible.
And Melly must be like, can we just have the South Australian election now? Why do we have to wait till March?
Can't we have the next 4 or 5 now?
Yeah, I don't think he's particularly worried about March timelines either.
No. But you just kind of like to really, like, when you got the foot on the neck.
He's got the Braxy about him, doesn't he? Like, he'll be I remember Michael Kroger telling me once Steve Braxy will be Premier for as long as he wants. He didn't say it happily. I got the same feeling about Malley. Like, he'll be Premier until he decides he doesn't want to be anymore.
Yeah. Look, the other thing I would say about South Australia is, again, this is a credit to their campaign office. I've always had the view that South Australia is very clear. This is our target seats list. This is where resources are going, and they are all in. There is none of this. Like, there are factional differences in that state, but there is none of this kind of like moving things based on whose faction is where. They pick their seats, they stick in them, and they properly get it done. And once a candidate has been sort of elected, they give them the resources to become a good campaigner, but there is an expectation you hold your seat, which means that they can do this thing. I think they're a phenomenal branch.
They are.
Let's move to sunny Queensland. It's even sunnier now. Labor had a 3.8% swing on our primary, taking us to 31.2. There's a 4.3% swing against the Tories, taking their primary down to 35.3. Had a 3.2% swing on a two-party preferred. Labor's two-party preferred in Queensland now is 49.1. We finally won a swag of seats in Queensland. And we said in our Path to 76 episode with Evan Moorhead, I said, Evan, is this a now or never moment for the Queensland branch in federal politics in this iteration of the Albanese government? And it was a now moment because we gained Leichhardt, Bonner, Dixon, Petrie and Ford off of the LNP, and we gained off of the Greens, Brisbane and Griffith. Huge result. Jessie, your thoughts about what happened in Queensland?
Well, the Queensland branch demonstrating the rest of the country a bunch of chauvinist was not on my bingo card for this election, but I think it's 6 more women joining the federal parliament out of Queensland, out of the Labor Party, which is phenomenal. I also think
we need affirmative action for men there.
Credit to the Prime Minister and to Annika Wells, who kind of had this whole, she's going to spend a lot of time with these candidates and sort of demonstrate, particularly to those teal kind of women, that this is the sort of party Labor is, and we're safe pair of hands, and we understand you. And I think it worked incredibly well. So credit to both of them. And obviously the prominence of Jim in the national media is also very good for that state. So I'm very happy to see these seats that are coming out of Queensland. What I don't want to hear is we have all these seats in Queensland now, we still need to send money up to them, because I find that it doesn't matter how many seats Queensland have, we always have to make more federal investment in the state. And Victoria, as David has aptly pointed out, is basically holding up the whole Labor Party on its shoulders and winning seats that no one's ever heard of before. I'd like a little bit of show me the money in Victoria.
David?
Well, I think this is more humble pie for me. I've always regarded Queensland as the special needs branch of the Australian Labor Party. And on this occasion, they came home with the bacon, which is fabulous. You remember how angry I was that they sort of had a nap and lost 3 seats to the Greens. They've recovered their honour by winning Brisbane and Griffith back. Outstanding results. Albo, I'm sure, is particularly thrilled about winning back Griffith, and winning those seats across Brisbane and in Leichhardt. Fabulous result. Let's hope they can bed that down and win their newfound campaign laurels with some continuing success.
I actually want to acknowledge the work of the party secretary up there, Kate Flanders. She is actually an incredibly talented campaigner and party secretary, very, very capable, but also there's an infectious nature to her leadership. She makes hard work fun, and it shows. If you ever go up there and actually spend time with campaigners, they're enjoying the work that they do. They're doing it with some joy. People are super motivated, and I think that that's a really important thing that we often forget about, because it is hard work that we do, and sometimes we can be a little bit too serious. I think I saw Noah Carroll smile once when I worked at head office, but Kate's the complete opposite. She's a hard nose, but also she brings some positivity to the work, and I think that's part of what we saw in the outcome here in Queensland.
Can I also add to that the elevation of Mitchell Kingston, who I think is one of the best campaigners in the country, who's coming through from the Queensland branch into the national office for the campaign, I think has paid off in spades as well.
Absolutely. Let's go to Tassie.
Red Island.
Yeah, who knew that they were still a part of the Federation? 9.7% swing on our primary, taking our primary up to 36.9. 8.4% swing against the coalition, taking their primary down to 26.
Anne Urquhart, Senator Anne Urquhart stormed Braddon. It's like she arrived with the 101st Airborne Brigade and just stormed Braddon with more than a 10% swing. I don't know who had that on their bingo card, but wow.
8.3.
Running though.
8.3% swing on our two-party preferred. Our two-party preferred now is at 62.6. In doing so, we won Bass and Braddon with swings of up to 10 and 15% on our two-party preferred. It's off the charts. When we had the session with Jack, we were despondent about Tasmania. Jack lives there. And I was like, oh, what are we going to get out of Tassie? He goes, oh, well, it's going to be tough, but hopefully we win Lions. Oh, my God.
We won Lions. Every village and town. And that's a Tory electorate line. It's like it's hard work. I don't know how hopeful we were of holding it again until we changed candidate. Amazing. And now there's talk about that translating into an amazing Senate result in Tasmania too.
Well, there's so many senators down there.
Well, there may not be Senator Lambie any longer, it seems. Depending on how
that would be a real loss.
Read that.
Although she may lose to One Nation, so let's not get too excited.
Okay, Western Australia, a 0.6% swing against us in our primary, taking it down to 36.3. A 3% swing to the coalition on their primary, taking up to 31. A 0.6% swing to us on our two-party preferred. Our two-party preferred now is 55.6. So a swing of 0.6% against Labor on our primary. How long can the WA Labor Premier Roger Cook hang on to his leadership? Jessie?
It's called the Jacinta Allen test.
Yeah, I mean, really, these questions have to be asked. Roger, drag on the ticket.
Anyone who thinks Roger's safe is delusional.
I'm going to move past all of that. I was texting with someone from this kind of speaks to the deep trauma from 2019. I was texting with a WA MP on Friday night, who was really worried because people were being pulled off their seat that they were looking after to be sent to Moore. And I was like, Moore? That is ridiculous. What are they doing? Their eyes are way too big for their stomach. And again, turns out incorrect.
Unbelievable. Winning the seat of Moore. Huge.
Bad news in Bullwinkle, I think.
Bad news in Bullwinkle?
Well, that was always going to be one of those. We're ahead by like 40 votes.
We are 59 votes ahead at the moment.
Yeah.
So I don't know how certain we can be that those 59 votes are going to see us through the postal count.
We will talk about the Nats at some point, I imagine, in this.
Yes, we will. And let's go to the territories, starting with the northern one. We had a 0.5% swing to us on our primary, taken up to 38.6, 4.7% swing to the coalition, and a 7.7% swing to the LNP on two-party preferred. So Labor's two-party preferred now is 54.8. We held on to Solomon, and we had a significant swing to us in Linyari, which is no longer a marginal seat, I guess. We were worried about Solomon on the night. I actually was like, I think we're going to lose it. I can't believe that. But in the end, some of those booths from, I think it was Nightcliff, and that hadn't come in yet, and it sort of ended up holding out for us. So thank God we managed to hold on to 2 seats in the territory. Any thoughts on that from either of you?
I was worried about Lingyari based on what happened in the Northern Territory election. As you say, we got a 7% swing there, which is awesome. Solomon, we held by the bear. We had a 6.5% swing against us in Solomon. So, that Northern Territory election was a harbinger for tough times in the Territory. It's great that we ended up with 2 out of 2.
Yeah. And the ACT, maybe Jessie, since you lived there for a while, I'll get you to give us some reflections on this one. A 2.7% swing to us on our primary. It takes our primary up to 47.6. We had a 3.6% swing to us on our two-party preferred. Our two-party preferred now is at 70.5. David Smith was in trouble there for a while against the independent Jessie Price, but based on current preference flows, it's predicted that David Smith will be returned to the seat of Bean.
Are you sure about that? He's only 800 votes ahead. And I think
I was on Poll Bludger before, and they were saying that was their predictor, just on the preference flow.
I was reading in the papers today that there's a question mark there. Jessie, from Canberra, tell us what's going to happen.
I used to work for David Smith at the Engineers Union, so I'm really hoping that he pulls through. I think that we may have made light of some of the concerns Katie Gallagher had about the ACT at the start of this podcast. I think that they held, we were poking fun at the idea that she would not be returned as a senator, which I think held up. But I think that we perhaps did not conceive of the importance of the Pocock vote in the lower house and backing of Jessie Price. And I think that has been significant. ACT has its own media market. They have their own type of voters. There has been long in the ACT this concern about, a really well-informed electorate being able to be convinced by an independent. I think that the ACT branch is very good, though, and hopefully Dave comes through, but they will do things, I think, a bit differently next time, and there will be a bit of a change about how they approach those seats.
Questions have to be asked, though. The opposition went to this electorate and said they were going to sack 41,000 workers in Canberra, and the only person standing in between them and losing their job was Anthony Albanese. Why was there a swing against Labor?
I think that the independents have done a phenomenal job of claiming, to Katie's point, a bunch of victories that had nothing to do with them.
I think it's also worth pointing out, and this was pointed out to me by a former Liberal MP who's a friend of mine, that the Liberal vote in the ACT is now 21%. Once upon a time, the Liberals used to get a senator out of this territory. So the Liberals are fading to extinction in this state, territory rather. That does mix things up pretty wildly for everybody else.
Agree.
Yeah. All right. Now, speaking of Liberals, let's take this opportunity to stick the boot into these guys, and I want to go first. And I've thought about this over the last couple of days. You know, what stuns me the most, and what I'm still almost in disbelief about, is how the Liberal Party and its once dominant campaign machine has fallen. Like think about it, from 2013 to 2022, they basically dominated Australian federal politics. When we think about the Liberal Party campaign machine, we think about Crosby, Textor, Stills and Nash. We think about the digital campaign outfit from New Zealand that would, every time they won a campaign, they'd get great write-ups in the paper. We think about, their strong messaging, good ad campaigns, how they just made our lives hell. And I'm sort of sitting here going, what's happened? It's like when Alex Ferguson left Manchester United and people started to realise, they're shit. Because as we've talked about over the course of this podcast, poor policy development, announcements made late and on top of each other, flip-flopping on a number of positions during the campaign, alienating 1.2 million Chinese Australians by calling them spies, banning Australians from wanting to work from home, no message discipline, didn't stick to a clear, simple message, which is funny because David and I talked about this earlier in the year and said this is actually what one of Dutton's strengths were, the reason why I was giving us heartburn. Clearly bad internal polling yet again, poor candidate vetting because it continued to be a problem for them. They have no seats in Adelaide, Hobart or Perth. They have 2 in Brisbane, 5 in Sydney, just barely got 3 in Melbourne. Most of their caucuses are either rural Conservatives or in Queensland. There's no moderate voices left in the party. Their state divisions, except for Queensland, are a mess. New South Wales is an administration. South Australia's at war with each other. WA's in a mess. Victoria is literally, the Victorian state division is papering over Grand Canyon-sized
the Victorian
crap.
division's in court, isn't it?
Well, and Liberal state MPs have said to state Labor MPs that the only way the Liberal Party wins the state election in November next year is if the Labor Party throws up on itself. Because he said, we are holding this shit together because you guys are all fighting with each other. Like, how deep a problem is the Liberal Party in this moment, David?
No, they're not. They're fabulous. And
I was going to say, I could listen to that all day.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah, I think, I mean, this has all been, the entrails of this have been gone over a fair bit now. Giving up their economic sort of centrepiece with opposing a tax cut, and then in the final moments of the campaign offering a future with bigger deficits, just blew a hole in the hull of what makes the Liberal Party float. So you can add to that lots of other weight, and you've touched on it. I mean, we talked about foreign affairs a little bit earlier. Absolute failure by the Liberal Party to engage in the foreign affairs and defence debate effectively. There are a few moments there, like when the Chinese flotilla circumnavigated Australia, or when there was talk of Russian bombers being based out of Indonesia, where the Liberals looked like they might scramble into a khaki uniform and change the tone of the debate, but it was beyond them. This was an election where there was no debate between foreign ministers, which is a little bit unusual. But of course, why would Penny Wong debate Coleman, who no one's ever heard of, and he just lost his seat? So a catastrophic campaign from the Liberal Party, and one for the ages, because it has really sent the Liberal Party spiralling into a moment of reflection and existential doubt. I think, just briefly telescoping ahead, one of the enormous challenges for the Liberal Party, including beyond the fact that no one votes for them, is the fact that the people who are now custodians of the task of repairing and rescuing the Liberal Party are going to be from regional Australia and Queensland. And that doesn't augur well. And certainly my friends in the Liberal Party, and I do have a few, are just deeply anxious about the thought that the think tank that's going to steward this Liberal Party future is so obnoxiously influenced by Sky at Night and other and News Limited. Like the voices that have sung the Liberal Party onto the rocks of catastrophe are still going to be the voices whispering in their ear and whispering into the ears of the Liberal Party's rank and file. Because I am a absolute masochist, I watched Sky at Night last night, and I listened to Paul Murray's ideas for the Liberal Party's future. And I just want to share them with you. I took a screenshot because I was so excited that someone had finally laid down the recipe for the Liberal Party's future. 1, take time to be honest, which of course would mean the Liberal Party stops listening to Paul Murray. 2, be seen to learn a lesson. 3, meet people where they are, so turn Sky off. 4, empower the next generation. They don't have a next generation. No. And the handful of people they do have who fit that description have lost their seats. And 5, everything's on the table. Well, thanks, Paul. These voices, these clumsy, ham-fisted sort of neo-fascists that wander out of the studios there at night, dripping blood, are the people who are killing the Liberal Party. Yeah. And if they don't wake up to it, well, we've done our best to warn them.
I like how Paul Murray says, be seen to be listening to people. Don't actually listen to them, just be seen to be listening to them.
To learn. Well, I always used to say after by-elections, if the electorate kicks you in the arse, have good manners to say ouch, which is sometimes a mistake I've watched Labor people make from time to time, explaining them away rather than acknowledging them. This one's so big, I don't see how the Liberal Party pretends nothing happened.
Jessie, where do you think the Liberal Party go from here?
So I think that David's analysis of the problem is so accurate that what they should do and what they're going to do are very different things. And they have been completely convinced by, like, we've seen this in Victoria for a very long time. If the Liberal Party keep listening to News Corp and others about how to win over Victorians, they will keep losing. It has been their problem here for a long time, and it continues to be their problem at a federal level, and we've seen it fail on a spectacular level in this campaign. I think that the actual answer for them, which is not that different to the answer for the Labor Party when we've been through significant strife, is you do not win elections in Australia trying to campaign from the extreme. And centre-left or centre-right, that is always going to be the answer. The Labor Party has had its challenges federally for a long period since 2010, but we have learnt our lessons about how to come together as a party and how we can be we have our little skirmishes, but how we can be a broad church, but generally push to the centre left. The Liberal Party need to go through the same journey and they need to come to the same conclusion if they are going to continue to be a force at a federal level.
I think the Labor Party is strengthened by the fact that we have no one in the media barracking for us.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But yeah, it's like, I mean, imagine what would happen to the Labor Party if we spent all our time over at The Guardian getting political strategy and political advice. Like we would just fall in a heap. And the Liberal Party are doing precisely this when they rely on their cheer squad and when they sit inside a Sky studio and think they're talking to people when all they're having their worst instincts confirmed.
And look, your listeners may not necessarily know this sort of thing happens behind the scenes, but newspaper editors have no compunction calling different opposition leaders and telling them what their campaign strategy should be. Like that happens. It's happened for years in Australia. And I just think the idea that you hand over what is a political professional's job over to people whose job is something entirely different for some indication about how they should behave is just never going to get the result you want.
Journalists and editors have always believed they're the smartest people in politics, but the Liberal Party is the only group that believes them.
That believes them. I do think Labor has suffered in the past of over-listening to those particular groups. There is a happy medium between how much attention you pay to mainstream media and how much you ignore the noise. But I think that the Liberal Party have absolutely drunk their own bathwater. And the other thing I would say is they need to stop hanging out with the same people who confirm their own biases. Like whatever you say about the Labor Party, we do spend time with people who have completely divergent views from us, mostly because they're the ones running the institutions. So the Liberal Party don't do this. And I think Benita made this point very well on your podcast a few weeks ago, just about how journalists need to do more to go speak to communities that are not, the inner city elite. The Liberal Party, similarly, are probably not even talking to the elite at this point, because Dutton certainly didn't think big business were on his side. So if big business are on your side and the outer suburbs aren't on your side, who is?
It's funny. Jesse and I were joking on Sunday about just the general, to your point, David, about how news editors or media editors all think that they're the smartest people in the room. And then we said we should, for an election campaign, we should all switch jobs. So we all go write all of their articles and they get to run the campaign and watch them completely fuck it up and understand, why didn't we win? Anyway.
And that accidentally double their circulation.
Yeah, exactly. We'd write much better articles as well. Geez, our readership's going up. What's going on? Anyway, we live in hope. Let's move to some of the other parties. Let's go to the Nationals. In terms of the national vote share for the National Party, the country party, they basically sat pat. But Bendigo has been an interesting count. Labor's Lisa Chess has had a margin of 11.2%, almost wiped away by the national candidate Andrew Lithlean, who got a swing of 29.7% on primary. That he picked up most of the Liberal primary. That was historically has been a Labor Liberal contest in Bendigo, but in this case, it's now become a Labor national contest. Labor is behind in the count at the moment. Actually, I didn't double check that because I wrote that yesterday. I think that might have changed. But Paul Bludger on current preference flows has it losing by 0.5%, but that can change. Anyway, the bottom line is it's going to be super
behind right now.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, David. So it's going to be super, super close. Jessie, your thoughts on what happened in Bendigo?
So I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that was following the national media that there've been $1.5 million spent by the Nationals in this seat. Why they did is I don't know, but certainly campaign effect is a thing. It's a thing we've said throughout this podcast. Like when you actually go in and campaign to election, you can expect a swing. I don't think that explains everything in the 29%. I will say in Victoria, the Nats at the 22 election did a phenomenal job. They got phenomenal outcomes. They won seats that no one thought they were going to win. The media spent a lot of time talking about how the state Nats, the federal party could learn a lot from them, and I suspect they have. I would say one of the things that we did not learn at the 22 state election when the Nats did so well is that we did an excellent job of landing the negative on the Liberal Party. Matthew Guy had been destroyed as a candidate. We didn't bother doing the national parties. And I think that shows in the primary. The same thing has happened here. Dutton has been destroyed to the extent where he lost his own seat. It was such an effective negative that he's the first opposition leader to lose his seat. We were not running a negative against the Nats. And we have talked on this podcast about how the coalition are in this really excellent position where they can campaign to the country under one brand and to the city in another. And what was challenging, to David's point, for this campaign is that they were fighting many fronts as a Liberal Party, not as a coalition, that they were struggling with. I think that we have, as a Labor Party, been aware of this brand differential and the benefits it brings the coalition. We have not been great at, therefore, connecting the negative campaign to that, because it's not the number one job. Like, Paul Erickson has done exactly what he should. He's destroyed the Liberal Party and their brand. I do think that a challenge here in Bendigo is that the Nats were not conceived to be part of Dutton's brand.
I think that's a really good point, and it reminds me about the fact that in 1999 we did do ads targeted at the National Party, against the National Party, the famous tax ad for the political nerds who remember it. But it's easy to do, isn't it? Because there are discrete media markets, television media markets, as well as radio and print. You can run an anti-national campaign in those media markets.
Absolutely. It should not have been the number one priority of NatSec. I do think that Victorian...
somewhere, or the Victorian...
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that Bullwinkle will probably be another example of this, where you had this three-corner contest, and as David pointed out in a previous podcast, the Nats and the Libs in WA hate each other with the fire of 1,000 suns. But again, maybe a Nat, I'm not sure whether they ran a Nat negative there, but if the Nat comes out with Bullwinkle and they didn't, I suspect they're going to think they should have. It's not a problem in Queensland because they are the same. It's the LNP, which I think is part of the reason we didn't see these kind of Nats, like these sort of odd results coming out of there. When the parties are split, I think that we need a Nats negative, especially in Victoria where we hold some of the regional, like quite a few of the regional centres, all of them in fact.
All of them,
yeah.
Okay, let's go to the Greens. What a disastrous night for the Greens. They started the night with 4 seats, may end up now with only 1. They threw everything into McNamara and Wills, and they had swings against them in McNamara. And the former state leader of the Greens, Samantha Ratnam, who made her choice to give up her state seat and run for the seat of Wills because she thought she was going to win, lost as well. And they extended their supply lines into these 2 seats and didn't see Labor sneak around the back and bomb the crap out of Melbourne. And now the Greens leader, national leader Adam Bandt, looks like he might be about to join the job seeker queue with Peter Dutton. David, you must be devastated at this result for the Greens.
Well, I was, Stephen, but then I was reassured when I saw Adam Bandt's press conference yesterday, where Adam Bandt made it clear that this had been a great election for the Greens, that as leader he had lifted their vote. They'd done nothing wrong, everything right, but they continued to be the persecuted, innocent people that they are, persecuted by parties and forces unknown working in collusion. One of the amazing things, I mean, the Greens never cease to impress me, really, with their capacity to just absolutely insist they did nothing wrong. The idea of reflecting on self-reflection just never occurs to them. And, of course, it never occurs to fanatics, does it? These people are not going to have a
You can't improve
glance.
on perfect.
No, you can't improve on the perfect. So an incredible press conference from Adam Bandt where he told us he was going to be fine. They were still in the hunt in Wills, and one of the journalists said, well, you are 3,000 votes behind there. Well, no, I'm told it's going to be fine. We're still in the hunt there. And then completely skipped over the fact that his campaign message, as we've touched upon on a few occasions, was asking the electorate to help him prepare a ransom note for Anthony Albanese. That was his campaign message. What a dud. So the Greens have got what they deserve. What it does tell us, I think, is that in some key parts of metropolitan Brisbane and Melbourne, and for that matter Sydney, which the Greens target and pour all of their resources into, they've now got a couple of problems. One of those is they've stopped talking about the environment, and so they have now graduated to being a political party in the minds of a lot of people. They're not the innocent baby disruptors that they were once seen to be. They're now part of the system, and that's how they're often perceived. This is why we see the Victorian Socialists, for instance, picking up a slab of the vote in some of these places because they're the new disruptors. The other interesting thing, I think, is that their antics around foreign affairs and supporting terrorist organisations at home and abroad is that this has lost them some support, and it's certainly hardened their opposition, as we see in Liberal Party preferences. And thirdly, I think their messaging, that sort of vitriolic fanaticism with which they approach these elections isn't working for them as it once did. And so I think it's too early to say the Greens have peaked, but this election really was a sliding door moment for them. And they're going to go from 5 to 1 or 2 in the House of Representatives, and once again they're going to be a Senate party. So very interesting, I think, to ponder their future.
There was, I'll go to you in a minute, Jessie. There was a woman who was standing in the queue at a booth in the Melbourne electorate on Saturday who was standing next to me, and I was standing next to the person handing out for the Greens, and the queue wasn't moving. So she had plenty of time to sort of disengage with the people around her. She had a nose ring. She said that the issues were important to her was the legalisation of cannabis and a whole bunch of other issues that would have normally fallen into the traditional sort of green social policy space. And then she turned to the guy handing out for the Greens and said to him, this 50-cent fare plan you're offering is ludicrous. Like, you guys have got to stop just promising things that you know full well that you will never, ever deliver on these things. It's fanciful. You're not taking this seriously anymore, and it's just a joke. And I'm sick of it. Like, I couldn't have written it better myself for what she said. And the Greens guy was back on his heels and he didn't know what to say. And I looked at him and went, oh, you've never been in this position before, have you? Mm-hmm. You've never ever stood on a polling booth where someone is giving you absolute verbals. We've been putting up with that for years, whether it be from the Liberal Party or anyone else.
For years.
Yeah, absolutely. And now you're copping a bit of medicine. This is great. And I never interrupt when this is going on. She just went after him, and eventually the queue moved on, which I was so disappointed about. But he kind of started to wander away, and I just thought, this person would have voted for the Greens 10 years ago.
Another dynamic here too, and that is that our supporters and the Green supporters, unlike activists, I'm talking about our supporters, our voters, all want us to get along.
Yeah.
Labor people don't want us to be distracted by attacking the Greens.
I promised I wasn't going to eye roll on this program, and now you've made me.
Same. Now, the difference here is that we don't spend our time as a party talking about the Greens. We actually hardly mention them. We remain laser focused on defeating the coalition. And so our voters are not offended by our behaviour. But the Greens do literally spend all of their time, all of their grabs, all of their media performances are all attacking the Labor Party. I mean, their press conference yesterday was the only thing that stands between a progressive Australia and is Labor. You know, Labor's going to stop this. Labor. Even in their dying breath, as they slip under the waves, is howling abuse of the Labor Party. And I think this does offend them. I think they've got a lot of supporters who see it and are actually getting sick of it.
So just to take up your point, Stephen, about these promises they make, there are two views, right? Whether it's them being entirely cynical about trying to take votes off the Labor Party, or whether the party itself is as delusional as to think that these offerings are reasonable and they are going to implement them. If anyone has 35 minutes and 60 seconds and 35 seconds and wants to spend some time watching a video from 3 years ago where Max Chandler Mather III gives his plan for the 18 years to a majority Greens government, it is quite the watch, and I encourage you after this result, go spend some time on it.
It's the next thing I'm watching.
I think the symmetry here between the Liberal Party and the Greens is actually quite is quite interesting. Both party bases are going to tell them that they were too centrist in this campaign and they need to respectively move to the right and the left. And both of those parts of the party are wrong. The Greens have moved way away from their reason for being. They're called the Greens for a reason, and carrying around a toothbrush makes not much sense in that context. So I think the Greens, I said it during the campaign as well, they look old, and if their whole base is trying to get young people to vote for them, they do need some renewal of people. Again, their youngest person in Max Chandler Mather is just lost, so maybe that's not the be-all and end-all. But they have some soul-searching to do, but I do think the party will be stupid and tell them we have to be more hysterical. Whereas I think, while I was hopeful that in 2010 their blocking of the CPRS would come home to roost to demonstrate that the Greens cannot be trusted in positions of power, it's actually happened at this election where things like the HAF have actually come back, the Housing Affordability Bill, have actually come back to bite the Greens in the arse. And the other thing I would say about Labor's campaign is I know demographics are not destiny. They did a really good job of claiming that generational shift that is happening. They have a minister that goes out there and calls herself the Minister for the Millennials. They have done a phenomenal job of having a offering with the HEX debt and the getting into a home. The Greens have missed the generational shift. The Liberals are nowhere near it, and I am hoping Labor can do everything to try and hold the voters they've gained in this campaign in that space.
Good take. Let's go to the Teals and then we'll get on to categories. David, just want to get your reflections because I think you're the one throughout the last couple of weeks talking about, we might be sleeping on the Teals and they may actually have a good election. And it looked like they were having a good election around about 9:30 on Saturday night. And then sobriety of Monday morning came in and now it doesn't look so great for him. But I just want to get your take on how you would rate their election.
Yeah, I think they did have a good election. And I say that as someone who wondered if this was going to be the end of them. Whether they were a phenomena of Morrison and that political moment, as that political moment felt around women, the treatment of women, particularly in Parliament, but beyond, and the Liberals' failure on climate change, did that frustration create the Teals, and did that sort of slow disappearance of that mean the Teals moment had gone? Well, the answer is no. The Teals are now a structural problem for the Liberal Party. They're a part of the furniture here, at least in Sydney. I think in Melbourne, notwithstanding both candidates celebrating their election victories on Saturday night, I think it's pretty clear the Liberals are now going to win Goldstein. I can hear Tim screaming in my ear, Goldstein, it's Goldstein. And I think things are looking grim for the Teals and Kooyong as well. And there'll be two important wins for the Liberal Party in terms of Generation Next. But in Sydney, they've consolidated, haven't they? They were elected in a canter. And although I think they'll fall short in Bradfield, they gave that a red-hot shake. And Bradfield is about as minted a Liberal Party seat as God can make. So, listen, and obviously in Curtin, where Cheney was re-elected. So I think the interesting thing about the Teals is how they push the Greens out, or the effect they're having. I think the Greens look at them with envious eyes because of the media support they generate and how all of those pearl-clutching, virtue-signalling inner-city Anglo-Marxists who once adored the Greens are now adoring the Teals. And the Greens are losing some currency and a media window because of that. So I think the Teals are a big problem for the Libs, a little problem for the Greens, and no problem at all for us. And they survived this election.
I think that the Teals in Victoria are a different animal than the Teals in New South Wales. And if Monique Ryan holds on in Kooyong, I think she will take some lessons out of that. I think that the way that even Kate Cheney has approached this parliament has been very different to how Monique Ryan has done it. And I think that she'd be right to take some lessons out of that. I think that Allegra... I think that it's not even that. I think that Allegra Spender and Tink, even though she didn't run again, and Kate Cheney certainly pushed this idea of small business, small government, sort of lower taxes, this kind of core small L liberal kind of space that they were trying to fit
Israel, which perhaps
absolutely they were. Victoria. And there was no dithering on that particular topic out of the Sydney Teals, arguably maybe because they're better connected to their community. I don't know. But Monique Ryan, I'm not saying she necessarily was against all of those small government things, but it was not the centrepiece of kind of what she was talking about. So I think that if she survives, there are some lessons for her out of that. I've said what I think of what happened in Goldstein. But I also think that it's interesting to see if Kooyong falls to Hamer, which I think is unlikely, but if it does, she has pulled a little bit of what I call a Cheryl Curnow in having a fair crack when she thought she lost. It will be interesting if she has to now join that party room.
Nice throwback. All right, let's get... Isn't it disappointing for Cheryl Curnow to know that she's become, her name has just become a thing, a verb, not a person? Anyway, speaking of verbs, let's get to the categories for this week because we're running out of time. And the first category is the mea culpa category. Forgive me, Father, for I was way off with that prediction, plain and simple. David, you already done... named a couple yourself throughout the episode anyway. Me, I'll do one. Aston, I just got that way wrong. I genuinely thought we weren't going to win Aston based on the information that I had to hand. And even, I think I might have even said in the final episode, I didn't think we were going to win Gilmore, and we won it easily. So I completely missed that one. Jessie, any...
I will say on Aston, I think I said if she's campaigned as hard as Jackson Taylor, she will win that seat, and I think she clearly has demonstrated she did. So, but yes, I similarly had ruled it out, as had everyone in the Labor Party, hence her lack of resources. I think the fact that I didn't even suggest we talk about Deakin is certainly a mea culpa. I don't even think that was on our list. I was a bit nervous about the fact that we left Corangamite off, but it turned out we didn't need to talk about that. And I told you that we should talk about Bruce, and we did not need to. Again, I think we called Hawke and Bruce, we talked about candidate-itis, and I think that is what was shown on the day.
David, do you have any other additional mea culpas before we move?
Yes, I've got a mea culpa from Jessie McCrone. You'll remember we had a debate about Albo doing The Rest is History, and I was talking about the importance of him getting out to all audiences, speaking to the young, speaking to the politically engaged, demonstrating his dexterity across all ecosystems, and that if he won this election, it would prove that was the right call. Well, the jury's in. It was the right call.
Oh, look, I would say that there's a few things that we can point out. I wasn't going to raise, for instance, David, that I said we should not be sending people to Gorton, and you said, I hope I'm wrong, and I said, you are wrong, and you said, I will be wrong one day, but today is not that day. I would argue.
Yeah, well, you can argue that if you want, but you're wrong, because if you look at the results, you can see that Labor's strategy in Hawke and Gorton worked brilliantly, and our
because we did improve our vote.
Improved. So that strategy has been vindicated. And so when various factional interests inside the Labor Party husband resources to their own sectional interests rather than the broader good, sometimes good flows from it.
Sometimes.
Oh, sure. Wouldn't we all want a field organiser? You have a field organiser. You have a field organiser. Field organisers grow on trees. Tory with the typewriter nominations. The first one we got is from Ian Hume, the Chip Legrand article in the Fairfax, arguing this result still doesn't justify the suburban rail loop despite all the electorates along its path swinging to Labor. That's from Ian Hume. I don't know if anyone wants to jump on that, or if you've got any other Tories with the typewriter nominations. Jessie?
I think it's very hard to separate the Tory for a typewriter on this particular topic and journalists that just have a bee in their bonnet about this particular infrastructure project, and it doesn't matter what happened to the election. And I think we said this before the podcast, it was either going to reaffirm what they already said or definitely reaffirm what they'd already said about that particular project. But we keep winning seats along its path. And as David just pointed out, we won a bunch of votes to us on primary where the western section of the SRL will be built. There's an argument it was endorsed all the way around the circle of the loop.
Well, what it certainly was, it wasn't a problem, was it?
No.
I think we can argue about whether it played any role in the campaign at all, to be honest. It's a state issue. I don't think it featured. But, for those who are arguing that it's some kind of diabolical lead in the saddle blades of Labor, well, that argument just went up in smoke.
The Age put in their editorial about who you should vote for that the federal party should have done a better job to differentiate itself with state Labor by separating themselves from this project, which would have demonstrated good fiscal rectitude. That's insane. One, it doesn't understand brand differential, and Labor at both levels is kind of how it works. It would have been an absolute oxygen thief. It was the most insane take that I read.
It would have bounced us off message, and we would have had a fight between state and federal Labor. It's the kind of stupid thing you do, like if, for instance, you go to spend the last week of your campaign talking about welcome to country. We don't make these kindergarten errors. We're professionals.
No, exactly.
It's a nice segue into David, do you have any other Tory with typewriter nominations?
Well, Peter Credlin, I was a bit excited on Friday night when she was sort of reassuring her viewers that, don't worry about the polls. We know how close this is. This is winnable. Dutton's run a great. I think that was a pretty magic moment.
Let's go to hot takes. So just off the chart, hot takes without any consideration for rational thought. There was one, and I got it nominated by two people, and I bloody well didn't write down their names now, so I feel sorry for them for doing that. But the one that was nominated, first of all, was Stephen Conroy, former Labor Senator Stephen Conroy on Sky News. And this person writes, 2 months ago, commentators were predicting losses of up to 5 seats in Victoria and would be a direct result of the unpopularity of the Premier Allen. As it stands, Labor looks to gain a bunch of seats, but there's now no correlation between state and federal issues at the election. And Stephen Connery's sort of gone on Sky News with this diatribe, and we're just going to play you a clip for it now.
If I just return to one seat that has been mentioned a couple of times, the seat of Bendigo. Why is the seat of Bendigo, gone against the trend of every other seat in Victoria with swings to Labor? And Lisa Chester's, and I love Lisa, she's done a great job. I used to go there regularly in Bendigo. Well, I'd invite you to look who the state member is.
Jacinta Allen.
Jacinta Allen.
Wow.
If the state Labor government delusionally believe that they have got a leave pass out of this election, they are delusional.
All right. Fair enough.
The first 15 minutes of every Victorian focus group was listening to the absolute hatred. And you had to just let it go. You just had to not even try and argue about the problems created by the state Labor government. Then when you shifted it, after about 15 minutes, you would shift them to talk about the national campaign, the contest between Albo and Peter Dunn. So I think those who are in the papers backgrounding that everything is great in Victoria because of what Anthony Albanese has achieved are delusional.
All right, who wants to jump on this any reflections on this hot take from the former senator?
Well, I feel like I covered this rather ably when we talked about Victoria. He's wrong. It's just as simple as that. His analysis is flawed and it might come from a bad place. So it's all bad. And, the fact that there's a swing to Labor, the fact that we've got a two-party preferred vote in the state of 56% plus, the fact that we've got 24 out of 38 seats, this is good news. This is a positive development. Very hard to do anything else.
One, I was very pleased to hear that Stephen Connery had done door knocking. That was the first I had heard that he was a prolific door knocker. He wasn't necessarily known for that when he was a senator, was he? The second thing I would say is that even Jason Wood, who is one of the few Liberals who held on in this state, and he's known to be a very good campaigner.
Oh, spare me. He's as dumb as a plank. His next idea will be his first.
Do not get me wrong.
The one Liberal surviving in Melbourne hasn't got two dendrites to rub together.
But he did reclaim that seat off us, and it is not necessarily Liberal heartland.
Well, if they're electing him time after time after time, it's proof that it is.
Anyway, he said this double trouble thing just didn't help at all. Like, this did not come up. Like, this is a guy who has everything to gain from shitting on a state Labor government, has come out and said this didn't happen. Like, I don't think he has a particular axe to grind on that front. He's not playing, as David says, 4D chess because he's a genius about how let's keep Jacinta Allen there because this will be the best pathway forward. Like, he's not very clever, but he is a campaigner and he has done the work. And he said it didn't help. It didn't make a difference.
The poster wasn't actually a bad photo, Jay. Hey, normally you kind of like put it in grayscale and sort of, blur it a bit, but actually it was a colour photo. I was like, this is a nice photo, Jacinta.
It didn't say Labor.
No idea. You need to know who they were. Anyway, all right. Cameron Strauss has nominated also for Hot Take. There was an article in the New Daily by Richard Dennis saying Labor should now do everything that the Greens want them to do because even though the Greens lost all of their seats in the lower house, is a bit of a hot take. Thank you, Cameron. Next, any other hot takes from folks?
Well, I think it's worth talking about Barry's remarks concerning the ABC coverage. I don't know if you've covered
He's down later. He's down later in bad night. So we'll get to.
Okay.
Let's go to Jessie. Do you have any other hot takes?
No, I think my hot take would be the worst thing about elections is on election night a narrative is put and it is never necessarily measured against the final results. And I am hoping that we have an opportunity to do that a bit later because everything that happens in the first 48 hours is a hot take because all the ballots haven't been counted.
Indeed. Longest river in Africa award, denial, nominated by a whole bunch of people. Adam Bank claiming it's the best night for the Greens in terms of actual votes cast for a party. Would point out there's like another 1.2 million voters that came onto the roll in the last 3 years. So naturally, if you stand still, you are going to have more voters anyway.
I just want to make one little point here. The Greens complain every election that their leader isn't part of the debates. And yet on election night, their leader is one of the leaders who gets to squib fronting the press and explaining what just happened. This is why they don't get to be part of the debates, because they still evade scrutiny. They still squirrel their way out of having to face the consequences of their actions. So I was looking forward to seeing Adam Bank on election night explain away this catastrophe. And I had to wait till Tuesday, and by then, of course, he carefully prepared his key lines that nothing was wrong and we've always been at war with East Asia. So to quote Orwell in 1984. So, just a little point there about the continuing frustration the Greens give me in my tranquil life.
Probably unanswerable questions. We know the result, but there's still so many known unknowns. Might change this to the Donald Rumsfeld Award. This one's from Michael Roots. Why were there decent swings to the Liberals in Durack and O'Connor? Noting Melissa Price has won her 5th election in Durack and perennial backbencher since having a cameo as a minister in one of the minor defence portfolios. Maybe David has some personal insight. Rick Wilson has also won his 5th election in O'Connor. Not many notable references on his Wikipedia page. Thank you, Michael. David, you got any insight on that particular probably unanswerable question?
No, I don't. It's an amazing seat. I've been up there a few times with my family for holidays. There's a lot of beautiful country, Australian outback out there, and an incredible mining industry. I wonder if it's got something to do with the Indigenous vote and the fact that our Senate representation in Western Australia doesn't include a stalwart of the Indigenous communities as it once did. I don't know. It's a good question.
Another one, this one's actually from me. Anthony Albanese is the first Labor Prime Minister to win back-to-back elections since Hawke in 87 and 1990. Does Albanese take his place in the Mount Rushmore of Labor Prime Ministers?
Definitely.
Yes, that is answerable.
Who else is on that?
I think
there's him.
It's Hawke, Whitlam and Albo if you're going by record. No question. And Albo's not done yet. I remember my colleagues telling me, you remember I whinged about this on the pod. My former federal colleagues told me, I shouldn't be such a nervous Nelly about federal Labor because, Hawke's first time was challenging and Howard's first time was challenging, and they both went on to be long-term prime ministers. I was at the time anxious that Albo wouldn't get that chance. Well, he has. So, being optimistic about the future, all of the collywobbles that our government has experienced over the last 3 years may have just trained a very talented team in how to make sure they're there for a long time.
Someone made reference to Tim Fisher's comments about a second-term government, which is it's the best one. It's the one where you know where all the levers are. You still have your plan that you're trying to implement, and you can kind of hit the ground running. And I'm hoping that's what we see from this government.
Yes.
Any other probably unanswerable questions from you, Jessie?
Oh, so many. But again, I think we have to wait until we get Corwell is a fascinating result, and there's talk that it's going to take 2 weeks to find out what happened there. There are a lot.
Isn't it interesting, just staying with Corwell for a moment, Jessie, that there was all of this speculation about outer suburbs of Melbourne having a big uprising, and it never happened in Bruce. Now, maybe that's because the Liberal candidate there kind of imploded in a very unusual way, but it didn't happen.
I was also told that we spent $1 million there. I could be wrong. I was told that's That would be anyway, go on.
It didn't happen in Hawke, didn't happen in Gorton, but something happened in Corwell, didn't it?
Yeah.
And then Muslim Voice, is that the one place they had an impact? I think Corwell is interesting, and our candidate, of course, being a Palestinian heritage, a Muslim by faith, that didn't seemingly mitigate the hostility of the Islamic community. There's a lot going on in Corwell.
one of the candidates, the independents, that I think has got 12% of the vote, which for the listeners where we're at right now, there's kind of a third thing sort of happening. Labor's out ahead with 20%. The Libs have 12. There's two independents that kind of have 12 each. And one of them is a former Labor mayor who did not win the pre-selection. I can't remember whether we ran one.
It was an internal left pre-selection.
Yeah, who was clearly unhappy with it and ran and like it may deprive us of the seat. And
I think
we're in a position where two different independents
it was a
very
national
different
executive
platforms.
pick.
I think it was too. I don't think we had the pre-selection.
No, I'm sure there was some kind of internal left process that might be a national left process. Anyway, we all know how frustrating those things can be.
But sometimes necessary.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Governor Tarkin. There's a Star Wars reference for those who... Well, we're close to May the 4th. We needed one.
Okay, let's do good night, bad night. Let's start with good night. So aside from the PM, what else had a good night? I'm going to nominate a couple here. Good night for campaign effects. Obviously, in February, Labor was languishing in the polls. The Libs decided to go small in their strategy. Was so convinced that they were going to win outright. And now they are a footnote in history as one of the worst campaigns ever. And yet the Labor campaigned their way back into being competitive and then pressed on and won a historic landslide. Good night for campaign effects. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's
Second one.
true.
Another good night. Good night for Paul Erickson and Jen Light and everyone at NatSec. Fantastic performance. As David said last week, need to be a statue built to those people if we win. They need a huge statue now because it was a landslide victory. I don't know if you want to jump in on that.
I just don't remember a campaign where the campaign itself and the architects of it played such a mighty role in the victory. Where Labor was at the start, where Labor is at the end, are just light years apart.
So someone has put it to me, which I think is accurate, that there was a really nice, like we talk about transference of power, like there was a really nice handover of how the strategic decision-making was made from government to the campaign. And they called that period between the budget and the Easter weekend 13 perfect days. And I think that's right. I think that we moved from a phenomenal budget that people didn't necessarily expect, the tactical response to that, and I suspect the Prime Minister himself was very clear about forcing a vote on taxes. The Libs cocked it up.
Parliamentary tactics is something Albo does get.
He's phenomenally good at it.
Yeah.
And that move, they did not put their foot wrong.
Yeah.
It is sometimes campaigns just work. This campaign just worked. They never just work, though, out of luck. And there has been a lot of effort and time put into the sequencing. There's a bit of luck about different things that have happened, but absolute credit to those people and the parliamentary Labor Party leaders who did that switch of strategic decision-making sort of really well.
And what a shame. All that hard work by Angus Taylor and the coalition just didn't seem to come home, did it? They spent 3 years in a banana lounge drinking pina coladas and then stumbled to their feet for the final race. It was a campaign, as you say, Jessie, perfect, versus, weekend at Bernie's.
Good night for young Labor supporters as well. I was at Trades Hall on Saturday evening, and it was just great to see so many young people and just the genuine jubilation and joy on their faces. And sure, we've experienced this at, Victorian state elections every 4 years, but at a federal level, this isn't something that's happened that often. I know we won last time, but, we didn't actually know if we got to 76 seats until Josh Burns won McNamara during the week. This was over by 9 p.m. The last time that happened was in 2007. And I think young activists, they need to taste this. I think it feeds the soul. You get angry from losses, but also you need to taste victory as well. And Saturday night I thought was important for that reason. So I thought that was a good night.
I really want to 2007, and I'm going to show my age here, was incredibly important to me in terms of where I was in my journey in the Labor Party and how important it was that I kept going and kept campaigning. And hopefully there's a whole generation of people out of last night that have the same impact.
Good night for moderate centre-left nuanced approach to political campaigning that both Josh Burns and Peter Khalil won their seats in the face of sort of, hard line positions from their flanks. So I thought that was great because I was worried that they were both going to lose.
Particularly good night for Josh knowing on the night. Like that was another mea culpa for me. I didn't think we'd know on election night, and we did, and credit to him.
And
unfortunately for Peter, he didn't. Yeah. And
5% swing to him. Brilliant on primary. Fantastic.
Unfortunately for Peter, he didn't know on the night, but yes, good work to him too.
Although I think it was clear on the night. He didn't admit to me that he'd won until yesterday, but I think it was clear on the night.
Last one's from Good Night from Mick Cowan. Laura Tingle, even when she was seated at the kids' table for the Christmas dinner for political commentators, she was able to assess the bloodbath expediently as anyone. And I actually thought, Tingle did a good job amongst a bad night, which we mentioned before. Any other good nights from you, Jessie, first? I'll go to David.
No, I endorse all of those. I think that I can't think. Oh, look, a good night for women generally in the caucus. There is a lot more. We didn't talk about it in Tasmania, but again, 4 women that have gone in, I think, extra over the 6 that have gone in from Queensland. Just a phenomenal result. And again, it speaks to the importance of a diverse caucus and how important that is to actually reflecting the people you represent. And I think Labor's affirmative action on this has a lot of credit that should go its way, but also that we've continued beyond.
David, any other good nights?
No, nothing to add to that.
Okay, bad nights. Let's how we do this. Do you guys have any ones you want to share first, perhaps, and then I'll go through the ones I've got here?
Like, have we covered the Greens with enough?
I've got a couple more in here. I'll start off with this first one. Bad night for the AEC. The queues at the polls in some of the booths was unnecessarily long, and the organisation by the AEC was an absolute shitfight clusterfuck.
Can I endorse this? We have more people pre-polling than ever, and yet, it took me 2 hours on election day to vote. 2 hours from where to go. That's unacceptable.
That is bad.
And that was just not singular to my booth. Apparently this is happening all across Victoria. Apart from the fact that also we did not have a pre-poll booth in the city of Melbourne where people work. Terrible.
I'm sure
terrible.
the town hall was one, wasn't it?
No,
it wasn't.
They haven't done it for the last 2 elections.
Yeah,
There was the city of Melbourne, the closest one was North Melbourne. There was a pre-poll.
Yeah, well, that's
outrageous.
Stunning.
I did want to do this analysis before the show, but I will be doing a run of how many polling places we had at this election versus previous ones.
Well, if you talk about the solar plexus of our democratic system, the Westgarth Primary School polling place, there were huge queues there in the morning, and it probably took, at its worst, an hour for someone to move through the queue, which was great news for the school selling sausages, democracy sausages. Not so good news. I've never seen queues like that before at that booth. Normally they're much more efficient. But then in the afternoon, tumbleweeds.
Wow.
Should have come voted there.
So yes. So 50% of people voting pre-poll. The day vote overwhelmingly concentrated in the morning. It's interesting to reflect on people's patterns. And I thought to myself as I watched these people standing in the queue, if you come back here at 4 p.m., you'll just go straight in. And sure enough, that's what happened.
There you go. Bad night for Angus Taylor. He had 3 years to come up with a tax plan.
Not true. I won't stand for it. I'm sick of him getting this kind of rap.
And in the end, he came up with nothing.
That's the next leader you're talking about.
I've decided he's the Lloyd Braun of politics. There's nothing there. He's a dud. No good. He's a dud. Bad night for, this has been nominated by Daniel Zamood. Bad night for Tony Barry for complaining about the analysis on the ABC that he actually was a part of.
I thought it was a great moment for Tony Barry. I know you know him too, Jen. He's a grumpy, but, his analysis is pretty good. If the Liberal Party followed his advice, and if they'd followed his advice the last 20 years, they may not be in the mess they're in now.
Yeah, I do think, though, if they followed some of his advice, they would have just committed Harry Carey and, have done. I think that we have agreed with a bunch of his analysis about what happened, although I would say, I'm on a podcast now kind of, giving my views about these things, but I don't know if I would have written that down on my Facebook
he doubled
page.
down on it, didn't he?
That's Tony.
Yeah.
He was never going to revile from it.
It's a good thing he's never going back on their coverage because I don't think they're going to invite him again.
No, he said the ABC's coverage was beyond woeful, just 6 hours of shallow analysis.
Which is true.
Bad night for all Liberals. This is from Mick Cowan. Bad night for all Liberal senators who drew the short straw to be a part of the various panels, more specifically James McGrath, whose faith in pre-poll voting being the saviour of the Liberals' vote across the board was bordering on providing a religious miracle for a sainthood. Very good, Mick.
Well, it worked in Goldstein.
It did. But, I mean, him saying I'm not prepared to call my own leaders.
The poor guy needed to say something. He's standing in the middle of this car crash. Dutton hasn't conceded, but everybody can see he's lost his seat. Talk about miserable jobs on election night. He's thinking, I've got to spin this out for 2 hours. I'll talk about pre-poll.
The other one, bad night for Senator Jane Hume. Cameron Strauss nominated her on her 7 coverage. And obviously, I think it's been shared a lot on social media is the Bill Shorten just absolutely ripping into her for I think it's a 5-minute diatribe. Bill's having a lot of fun post-politics.
Yeah, I would add Bill had a great night. And I think that there are some that would question whether he was going to be happy about this victory because, he run against Albo. Albo took the victory the next time. But he showed on that coverage he's a Labor man through and through. He is just really happy when we win, and that is brilliant and what we want to see.
Well, the front page, I don't know if it's the front page, but the Fin Review has got a story today criticising Bill Shorten for handing out ALP how to vote cards on Saturday, suggesting that a university vice-chancellor shouldn't be partisan. I spoke to Bill yesterday and he just said, if I hadn't have handed out Labor Party cards, which of course I've done my whole adult life, people would have said it's because I'm bitter and twisted about Albo's success. And if I do hand them out, I'm going to be attacked for being partisan. And sure enough, that's what happened. So, either way he was doomed. So at least it went down with Labor.
And as Stephen pointed out earlier, we're used to everyone saying these things about us. So he's hardened to that kind of.
Somewhere between News Corp and The Guardian, the Labor Party's getting copper criticism.
Any other bad nights from the two of you?
Yeah, I would say the bad night was for the campaign headquarters of the Liberal Party. I think this is probably a probably unanswerable question. We will never know where the blame entirely lies between the leader's office and the campaign CHQ. Maiden has what I would describe as the response briefing from the National Secretary today as to why it isn't actually his fault and this was all the leader's office. We'll see this play out. We won't know, but I think it was a bad night for that. The campaign office failed. Either they failed to wrangle their minister or they failed to run a good campaign.
You'll note, of course, that on election night Dutton took full responsibility and he's now lost his seat. He's not in the parliament. I think that might set the scene for all of the blame to be heaped on him and for everyone else to escape unscathed. And, of course, one of the chief villains in this catastrophe for the coalition is Angus Taylor, the architect of crippling their economic credentials, the architect of making sure their policy responses were so inept, and it doesn't look like he's setting himself up to take any blame.
Old Lloyd Braun. All right. Guess what? We've come to the end. And I want to conclude by just saying that we got feedback from a pretty respected politics journalist during the week. I won't name them because I don't want to embarrass them, but they said that they've been listening to all of these episodes and they said by far and away this has been the best election podcast coverage for this campaign season. He said it's interesting and it's informative and entertaining. I feel like I'm sitting in your lounge room just listening to the three of you have a warm conversation about the inner workings of this political campaign. So that's
the nicest thing Paul Murray's ever said about us.
And in order for us to do that, to make the best political election podcast coverage, it takes a village. So I actually want to thank some people. First of all, I want to thank our listeners. First of all, for listening to the show. Second of all, for sharing it amongst your networks and also for giving us feedback, both good and bad. And also for sending in your nominations and participating in each week's episode and just making it a bit more fun. We've had quite a few people actually join our Patreon community as well, so I'd like to give them a special shout-out. So thanks to Travis Dunn, Rebecca Fanning, Donald Vaughan, Michael O'Connor, Robert LaRocca, hello, Latrobe alum, Mary Truzik, Matt Smith, and Dan with no surname. So thank you very much, and to all of our Patreon listeners for continuing to support the show financially. We do appreciate it. And for those new folks that have joined, Grace will send you a message to get your mailing address so we can send you your Socially Democratic welcome pack. I also want to thank our special guests that we've had on the show, John Armitage, Reed Fleming, and Benita Kolovos. I also want to thank our producer, Grace, who we've recorded 11 hours of content over this election campaign. So that is a lot of editing, plus research, booking guests, publishing the damn thing, cutting up the reels, doing all the paid ads.
Redacting my comments.
Getting rid of a lot of the deflammatory stuff that David had said. We'll have to do like a director's cut at the end of the year, all done by the one person. So Grace, thank you so much for all of your diligent and hard work.
Yeah.
And also to my two co-hosts over the past 6 episodes, Jessie McCrone and David Feeney. Thank you for your bringing your depth of campaign experience, insights and honesty and joy as well. That's made this journey wonderful. Experience for not just myself, but obviously everyone listening along at home. So thank you very much.
It's been a lot of fun.
It has. I've enjoyed it.
Excellent. That's it for now. In the next 3 weeks, we're going to be bringing back our state-based guests that we did the Path to 76 episode. Some people are still listening to it because it's still going. And we're going to unpack each of the state results in the next 3 weeks. So look out for that. And also we're going to be doing a live show in Melbourne at the end of the month. So please watch out for that. But until now, thanks very much to everyone. Thank you, David. And thank you, Jessie.
Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, David.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Socially Democratic. Like the podcast? Hit the follow or subscribe button and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser and get all the latest updates on Socially Democratic by following us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky and LinkedIn. See you next Friday.